It's hard to imagine Justin Trudeau having a more embarrassing week than when he said people kind.
Maternal love is the love that's going to change the future of mankind. So we'd like you to look into
we
that.
like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind.
Or even when he went to India and became a Bollywood bridegroom. Or even the accusations about Groatgate.
Often a man experiences an interaction as being benign or not inappropriate, and a woman, particularly in a professional context, can experience it differently, and we have to respect that and reflect on that.
But the Prime Minister has topped himself yet again with not the best week in the political books. Anthony Fury, let's unpack the first issue with respect to Trans Mountain. Court ruling says we basically bought a $4.5 billion lemon.
And not good at all, because the whole reason they bought it, so they said, was to build it, to get her done. Now they're in a position where they have bought it and they're being told by the court, but you can't build it. So what are we going to do with these apples now?
So there's some suggestion that, in part with respect to the court ruling, was a number of Indigenous and Aboriginal groups have the right to shut this stuff down. But one of the things that people don't talk about is that there were 43 different Aboriginal and Indigenous groups that actually signed on to this pipeline and said, let's get it done. It's good for our communities. It's good for our economy. It's good for job creation. Why don't people talk about that?
Well, and I don't know. That's the question that I've written about before in my columns. I find it really frustrating that you've got, to your point, dozens of groups that have signed these MBAs, mutual benefit agreements, where they're going to see many thousands of dollars, sometimes millions of dollars over the years, going to their communities. So First Nations want it. Some of them don't. I actually looked at a map and I found out that the ones directly on the path of the line, they are the ones who want it the most. And some of these groups that are causing the biggest, making the biggest noise about it are not the ones directly affected by it. So I think it's time we actually stand up for First Nations here.
All right. So we saw the Finance Minister of Canada, Bill Morneau, and of course the Prime Minister be questioned about this last week. Very few answers were given to the Canadian people as to what the next steps are. What do you anticipate will happen in the coming days?
Well, you know, our friend Lauren Gunter says the thing's not going to be built, and he's been saying that since day one, predicting this sort of stuff. So a lot of foot dragging, a lot of, well, this was all inevitable, people shrugging it off. And I think we're going to get a lot of shrugs. And the problem I find with all of this, Adrian, is the things you brought up about people kind. I mean, they're terrible stories, terrible headlines, but they're more Trudeau being goofy. These are the files of Trudeau and cabinet being serious public policy people and bringing about real change to grow the middle class. They're failing on these really meat and potato issues, and that's the problem.
Speaking of failing on big picture issues when it comes to our country, NAFTA deal still has not been negotiated with Canada and the United States. Of course, we saw Mexico get their deal done with the U.S., and now we have secret tapings of the President Trump saying how he wants to deal with Canada, what he really genuinely feels about our country. Let's go back just a little moment for our viewers, because there was an award that Chrystia Freeland, who is in charge of the negotiations for NAFTA, she took an award last week. Tell us a little bit about that.
Diplomat of the Year award, apparently, from Foreign Policy magazine. I remember the reports out on this where Chrystia Freeland stands up for freedom and truth and democracy. I read the speech, Adrian. This was back in June. She basically accused Donald Trump of furthering the decline of Western civilization. And I thought, it's one thing if you're a MSNBC, CNN contributor to sort of go on a tirade about this. If you're a foreign minister for Canada doing big trade talks at that time where tariffs are being threatened, you don't want to make that threat. You don't want to make that statement, give that speech. And now we see Trump. He heard that speech. Yeah. He was not happy about it.
Well, and when you're bargaining from a position of weakness, which is where Canada is right now, the big question mark on the table is whether or not supply management is going to be eliminated. I mean, we can talk about all sorts of irony with respect to Maxime Bernier and Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives, and it being potentially Justin Trudeau that may have to eliminate supply management. Is that even a possibility?
I think here's what they're going to do, because Trudeau has been saying really firm, no, we stand by the status quo of supply management. I think they're going to allow a few more percentage points of dairy into Canada from the U.S., or they're going to try to. We'll see what the U.S. actually has to say about this, like they did with the European CETA deal, and they can basically say, well, we've kept supply management intact, even though they let more in. And the dairy farmers aren't going to be happy about that, but they're going to try and claim that they've had their cake and eaten it too.
All right, we certainly do want to see our Canadian government succeed and get a deal done for all of us. Log on to Facebook and Twitter. Let us know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.